poor girl got stuck in an elevator with the millionaire CEO. And one sentence changed everything. Before we begin, comment below and tell us which city you're watching from. And when it's over, be sure to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story. She was just the quiet assistant. He was the boss no one dared talk to, cold, untouchable, broken in ways no one ever saw. Then the elevator stopped. Just the two of them and the silence. And in that silence, she said something. Not loud, not even bold, but it pierced through his armor like nothing else ever had. Do you ever wonder what people will say at your funeral? That was the moment he started to feel again. Sometimes it takes being trapped to finally set something free. The silence between floors. The rain came down in waves, a curtain of gray that swallowed the city whole. It blurred lights, drowned horns, and made strangers rush past each other without looking up. Inside the tall glass tower of Halden and Locke, the world felt insulated, silent, sterile, untouchable. People moved like ghosts through the halls, heads lowered, eyes avoiding the man in the dark gray suit. Michael Lockich. He didn't bark orders. He didn't need to. His presence was a kind of gravity, pulling everyone into discomfort. When he walked by, conversations died mid-sentence. When he entered a room, people cleared the way, as if instinctively afraid of being in his path. But Grace walked behind him anyway, not because she wasn't afraid she was, but because that was her job. Executive assistant, invisible, efficient, replaceable. Her blouse was still damp from the storm, clinging lightly to her back. She had run in heels from the subway, gripping her folder like it was her dignity. A strand of hair stuck to her cheek. She didn't bother fixing it. He hadn't said a word to her since yesterday's briefing. In fact, he rarely spoke at all unless it involved numbers, names, or orders. Never asked about her weekend, never looked her in the eye, never saw her. Grace didn't expect anything else. That's how it had always been. That's how it was safer. They reached the elevator at the same time. She pressed the button. He stood beside her, scrolling through his sleek watch with the kind of practiced irritation only powerful men mastered. The traffic's going to be a nightmare, he muttered, mostly to himself. Grace blinked. Her heart skipped. Did he just speak to her? The elevator dinged. They stepped in. The doors closed, and 5 seconds later, everything stopped. A jolt, a flicker of lights, then nothing. Michael cursed under his breath and pressed the emergency button. A crackled voice came through the speaker, calm but distant. Temporary power issue. Please remain calm. A technician has been dispatched. He let out a clipped breath. Unbelievable. Grace backed against the wall, gripping the folder tighter. The air thickened, not with heat, but with everything unsaid. She avoided looking at him. His jaw was tense, foot tapping, eyes hard. She counted the seconds in her head. Anything to drown the weight of the silence. And then she said it. Not loud, not brave, just soft enough to feel like a secret. Do you ever wonder what people would say at your funeral? Michael turned slowly toward her. What? She swallowed. Sorry, that came out weird. I think about it sometimes. If I disappeared tomorrow, what would people actually remember? He stared, not angrily, just surprised, like she'd suddenly grown a second head. I talk too much when I'm nervous, she added quickly. You can ignore me. He didn't ignore her. He looked at her, really looked. And what do you think they'd say? He asked, voice lower now. Grace gave a weak smile. She was kind. She brought muffins sometimes. She was quiet. She laughed a little, but her eyes didn't join in. He raised an eyebrow. You think that's all people would say about you? She met his gaze. Yeah, because that's all they know. I don't open up much. He nodded once, then softly. Neither do I. The silence that followed wasn't heavy this time. It felt like the moment before a storm breaks still, full of something unspoken. Grace exhaled. I used to be different, she said. I think everyone starts that way, until something makes them close the door. Michael didn't reply immediately. His voice came softer now, almost hesitant. What closed yours? Her lips parted. A pause. Then, losing someone. Her voice cracked, but she didn't flinch. The kind of loss that doesn't just break your heart, it rewrites it. Michael leaned back against the elevator wall, saying nothing, but his face shifted slightly, subtly, as if her words had found something dormant in him. I was engaged. She continued. 3 years ago, he was kind, left little notes in my lunchbox, made up songs about how much he hated oatmeal. She smiled at the memory. Then one night, he didn't come home. The air thickened. Michael didn't move. Car accident, she said. I was texting him about dinner plans, and then I was signing forms I couldn't even read. She looked down, blinking hard. After that, I folded in on myself, stopped talking, stopped dreaming. Work became the only thing that didn't hurt. Silence stretched long and full. Then his voice came, quiet and careful. I lost someone too. She looked up. My brother. Cancer. He was the light in every room. I buried myself in work after that. People think I'm ambitious. I'm just trying to outrun grief. Grace stared at him, her heart tight in her chest. For a moment, the elevator didn't feel so small. It felt like the only place in the world big enough for what they were both holding. You ever stop running? She whispered. Michael looked at her, eyes steady. No, but sometimes I slow down, enough to feel the ache. And right then, she saw it. The truth in his expression. He wasn't cruel. He was hurt. And maybe, just maybe, so was she. Sometimes the person you least expect is the one carrying the same weight you thought was yours alone. Chapter 1. The pause between floors. The elevator didn't make another sound. No buzz. Just silence. Michael Lockach stood still beside her, arms crossed tightly over his chest, staring at the floor number display, like sheer willpower could force it to light up again. Grace didn't move either. She was afraid if she did, she might breathe too loud, or worse, say something else strange. But the words were already out there, floating between them like dust in sunlight. Do you ever wonder what people would say at your funeral? He hadn't laughed. He hadn't rolled his eyes. He had listened. And now they were both standing in a silence that felt charged. Not awkward, not quite comfortable, just real. Grace shifted slightly, pressing her back harder against the cold elevator wall. She could hear the storm outside, distant thunder rumbling like a warning. Her fingers trembled where they clutched the folder still tight against her chest like a life raft. Michael suddenly broke the silence, his voice quieter than before. You said people would remember that you brought muffins. Grace gave a small, embarrassed laugh. Yeah, blueberry, from the corner bakery on 8th. I used to bring them every other Friday. No one noticed when I stopped. I noticed, he said. Her eyes snapped to him. You did. He didn't look at her. You switched to granola bars. You leave one in the break room instead. Still thoughtful. Just more distant. She blinked, speechless. So, he had noticed all this time. She thought she was invisible to him. A shadow that passed him coffee and took down his calendar updates. But he'd seen the details, the subtle changes. Why didn't you ever say anything? She asked. Michael's eyes moved to hers then, steady, unflinching. Because I don't say things unless I'm sure they matter. Grace's breath caught. Then he added, quieter, and I wasn't ready to care. There it was again, that flicker beneath the surface, a kind of raw honesty that didn't match the man in the boardroom. I used to bring muffins to feel needed, she admitted. After Jason died, She stopped, shook her head. I guess it was my way of proving I still existed. Michael tilted his head, brow furrowed. Jason, your fiancé. She nodded. He hesitated, then leaned back against the wall opposite her. I never got engaged. He said, too busy, too closed off. Still are, she said, before she could stop herself. To her surprise, he smiled, just a little, a flicker at the corner of his lips. You're not wrong. The elevator creaked, but didn't move. Somewhere above, there was a mechanical whir, but it faded again. Grace let herself slide slowly to the floor, sitting cross-legged. Her heels ached, and her shoulders were tired. She looked up at him. You can sit, you know. The floor won't bite. Michael looked unsure, like sitting was a vulnerability he hadn't negotiated. But then, to her surprise, he slid down the wall and sat opposite her, mirroring her posture. They stared at each other in the dim light. I thought you didn't like small talk, she said. I don't, he replied. This doesn't feel like small talk. Grace nodded. Feels like something else. He studied her. What do you want people to say? At your funeral, she looked down at her hands. I want them to say, I made them feel seen, that I mattered to someone, that I wasn't just background noise. Michael's voice was low. You're not background noise. Their eyes met. Something quiet passed between them. Then he said, almost to himself, I didn't cry at my brother's funeral. Grace didn't respond, just waited. I was the one who gave the eulogy. Everyone said it was powerful, but I didn't remember a single word of it. I wrote it the night before, memorized it like a sales pitch. She watched him carefully. I don't think I've really cried since, he added. Maybe you don't need to, she said softly. Maybe you just need someone who gets it. His gaze lingered on her. Maybe he already had. Time passed differently in that space, without clocks, without distractions, just the hum of two people no longer pretending. Michael leaned his head back, eyes closed. Do you think grief ever leaves? Grace shook her head. I think it just stops screaming. He opened his eyes and looked at her. You're very good at this, he said. She tilted her head. At what? At being real. Grace let out a soft laugh. Only because I stopped trying to be impressive a long time ago. A beat of silence. Then he whispered, maybe that's what makes you impressive. The elevator jolted. They both looked up as the lights blinked, and the low grind of gears finally hummed beneath them. The elevator began to move, slowly, one floor at a time. They didn't speak. When the doors finally opened, the hallway was alive again. People passed by without looking, as if nothing had changed. But Grace felt different. So did he. She stepped forward. So did Michael. Their hands brushed for a second. Just a whisper of contact. Grace, he said. Her name, like a question and a promise. She turned back. Let's not pretend again. She froze, then walked away. But behind her, Michael stood still, watching her, like someone who had finally seen color after years of living in gray. And in her chest, something stirred that hadn't moved in years. Sometimes, all it takes is a broken elevator to crack open a heart that forgot how to feel. Chapter 2. Let's not pretend. The next morning, the storm had passed, but the sky still wore its grief like a bruise, pale, heavy, uncertain. Grace arrived at the office 20 minutes earlier than usual. Her usual calm replaced by a quiet chaos she couldn't name. Her heels clicked softly down the polished hallway. But today, the sound didn't comfort her. She kept her head low. Her blouse was ironed, her hair tucked back neatly. Everything in place, everything except her heart. She reached her desk and placed her bag down slowly. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, but she didn't start typing. Her mind kept drifting to that moment in the elevator. His voice, rough and honest. His eyes, less sharp, more searching. And then, let's not pretend again. She didn't know what he meant. Or maybe she did. And that was the part that scared her. The office began to stir around her. Phones rang. Coffee machines hissed. Footsteps passed like waves. But she stayed still. At exactly 8:03, the door to Michael Lockak's office opened. Her breath caught. He stepped out. Not hurried, not cold, but deliberate. And for the first time since she'd started working here, he looked directly at her. "Good morning, Grace." Her name sounded different coming from him. Warmer, real. She blinked. "Good morning." He didn't look away. He didn't rush off. Instead, he took 2 steps closer. "Could I talk to you for a second?" Grace glanced around, as if checking if she was being watched, though she didn't know why, then nodded. Of course. He motioned toward his office. She followed, her heart a thud in her chest. Inside, the room was, as it always was, cool, minimal, untouched by emotion. But something in the air had changed. Michael leaned against the edge of his desk, not sitting, not towering, just there. "I thought a lot about what you said yesterday," he said. Grace stood by the window, unsure of where to place her hands. She settled on clasping them together. "I wasn't trying to say anything important," she replied. "I just spoke. That's exactly why it mattered." He said. She looked down. "I realized," he continued, "that I don't really know anyone here. I see people. I manage them. But I never listen. Not like I listen to you." Grace dared a glance up. He wasn't smiling. Not really. But his eyes held something: sincerity, maybe, or regret. "I wanted to say thank you," he said, "for being honest, for trusting me." Her throat tightened. "I wasn't sure if I should have," she said. "I'm glad you did." A quiet moment stretched between them. Then came the part that turned the air inside out. "I was wondering," he said, voice a little lower now, "if you'd like to join me for coffee after work today." She blinked. "Coffee?" He nodded. "Not as my assistant, just Grace." Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came. She started, then stopped. "I don't know. Yesterday felt like a moment. I'm not sure what this is now." Michael nodded. "Fair enough." He didn't push, didn't rush to explain, just offered her a quiet smile, the kind that barely moved his lips, but still softened the lines in his face. "If you change your mind," he said. "I'll be downstairs at 6. He stepped aside, giving her space to leave. Grace walked out slowly, still unsure whether her pulse was from fear or something else entirely. The rest of the day moved like water under ice. She worked, answered emails, scheduled meetings, but none of it really registered. Her mind kept going back to the elevator, to the way his voice had trembled, to how he said her name, like it meant something. 6 o'clock! The numbers on her screen blurred as the clock neared that hour. She stayed seated. 5:57, still there. 5:58, still frozen. What was this? Curiosity, guilt, pity, or worse, was it real? 5:15. She stood. She didn't think. She just moved. Out the door, down the elevator, across the lobby, toward the glass entrance. And there he was, Michael, standing by the glass doors, hands in his pockets, holding 2 paper cups. "You came," he said softly. "I wasn't sure I would," she admitted. "I was." He handed her a cup. "I didn't know how you take it, so I guessed." She sipped. "It was exactly right. You guessed right. I'm good with details," he said. They walked outside. The air was cool, the rain gone, but the scent of it still clinging to the pavement. The world looked rinsed, like something had been washed clean. They didn't talk at first, and that was okay. The silence wasn't empty. It felt earned. After a while, Michael said, "My brother used to say something whenever life felt like it was falling apart. He'd say, 'This is just the in-between. Don't build your house here.'" Grace smiled faintly. I love that. Michael turned toward her. You've been living in the in-between, haven't you? She nodded, her eyes shining in the glow of the streetlight. I think I forgot how to move forward. He stopped walking, turned to her. Then maybe we help each other remember. Grace stared at him, not because he was handsome, which he was, but because in that moment, she believed him. But just as she opened her mouth to reply, a voice called from across the street. Michael, a woman, tall, poised, confident, black dress, crimson heels, a face that knew she was remembered. Michael's entire body tensed. Danica, he said, voice clipped. She walked toward them like she belonged in the frame, wrapped her arms around him like it was nothing. Grace took a step back. Michael pulled away quickly, his eyes flicking to Grace. This is someone I used to work with, he said. Danica turned, eyes sharp and amused. Oh, she said coolly, his assistant. Cute. Grace's smile cracked. Michael's jaw tightened. It's fine, Grace said quickly. And then she walked away, faster than she meant to. Behind her, the coffee in her cup was still warm, but everything else had gone cold. She didn't cry that night, not because it didn't hurt, but because she was too tired to feel it fully. Chapter 3. This is just the in-between. Grace didn't sleep that night. Not really. She lay in bed in the same dusty rose blouse she had worn to work, the one still faintly scented with coffee and disappointment, the same blouse she hadn't had the energy to take off. Her hands rested in her lap, fingers curled tightly around the hem like it might hold her together. She told herself it didn't mean anything, that women like Danica were part of men like Michael's world, flawless, untouchable, unbothered. She told herself it was silly to feel this much over a moment, over coffee. But logic doesn't soften the ache of being small in someone's eyes, especially when you just started to feel seen. She stared at her ceiling, the fan spinning shadows across the room. That one word clung to her skin like the last of the storm. Cute. Not brilliant. Not important. Not someone worth mentioning. Just cute. Like a child, or a pet, or someone easy to dismiss. And the worst part, Michael hadn't corrected her, hadn't said anything. She turned on her side, gripping her pillow like an anchor. Maybe that's just how it was always going to be. She'd spent years learning to be invisible. Maybe it was foolish to think anyone, let alone him, could see past the quiet. Maybe the elevator had just been a pause, not a beginning. The next morning, she arrived earlier than usual. She didn't know why. Habit, hope, or maybe because she needed to prove to herself that she could still stand tall. The office was still waking up. Lights flickering to life. Desks abandoned. Coffee brewing somewhere in the back. She made her way to her desk and sat down quietly. The screen glowed. Familiar. Predictable. She didn't expect anything, especially not him. At 8:03 a.m., the door to his office opened. Grace's heart knocked hard against her ribs. Michael stepped out, but he didn't move with his usual calculated pace. He walked slowly, hesitantly, like someone approaching a line he wasn't sure he had the right to cross. When their eyes met, something flickered, unspoken, a little raw. "Can we talk?" he asked. Voice lower than usual. Grace blinked. "Now." He nodded. "Yeah. If you're okay with that." She stood slowly. Her hands were cold, her heart loud. They entered his office. Neither of them sat. Michael stood by his desk, his eyes not quite meeting hers. His shoulders held tension, but not the kind she was used to seeing. This was guilt about yesterday. He began. "I'm sorry." She didn't speak. "I should have introduced you properly." He added. "I should have corrected her." Grace finally looked up. Her voice was steady, but soft. "Why didn't you?" Michael's eyes flicked to hers, then away again. "Because I panicked," he said. That made her pause. "I've never had this This thing that's growing between us. He continued. I didn't expect it. And when Danica showed up, I went into habit mode. I shut down. It wasn't about you. It was about me being afraid. Grace's lips parted slightly. His honesty caught her off guard. I know that's not an excuse, he said quickly. But I need you to know what happened in that elevator wasn't just a moment to me. It mattered. She studied him, unsure of what to believe. His words were right, but she'd heard right things before from people who didn't stay. You've been cold for so long, she said. How do I know this isn't just curiosity? Michael didn't hesitate. Because I've had curiosity before, he said. This feels nothing like that. The room went still. Then she asked, quietly, what do you want from me? Michael, he took a breath. I don't know yet, he admitted, but I know I want to know you. Outside of this office, away from the titles. She hesitated. And if I'm not who you imagined, his eyes locked on hers, steady, certain, then I'll be lucky to know the truth. Her chest tightened. A fragile warmth spread beneath her ribs. He stepped back, giving her space. I don't need perfect, he added, just real. She looked down at her shoes, then back up at him. I'm scared too, she whispered. I know, he replied gently. So let's start with something simple. He walked to his desk and opened the bottom drawer. When he turned back, he was holding a small, slightly crumpled paper bag. She raised an eyebrow. What is that? Michael smiled a small, human smile. He opened the bag and pulled out a single blueberry muffin. Her jaw dropped. No. He nodded. Yes, she laughed. How did you even... You mentioned them, and I pay attention now. She shook her head, biting her lip to keep from smiling. This is manipulative. You're bribing me with baked goods. He grinned. And it's working. For a moment, everything softened. Grace sat across from him this time. Not because she was invited, but because she wanted to. They didn't talk about meetings or memos. Instead, they talked about books, bad reality TV, and her irrational fear of thunderstorms. Then, just as easily, the tone shifted again. Michael's voice grew quiet. I haven't told anyone this before, he said, but the night before, my brother died. I promised him I'd live a full life, that I'd love deeply, that I wouldn't waste time. Grace's heart ached, and I didn't, he said, not for years. Until I did, she looked at him. Then maybe this is your reminder. He met her eyes, and for a second, it looked like he might reach for her, but he didn't. Instead, he said, would you come to dinner with me? Grace blinked. A real one. He nodded. No suits, no roles, just us. She hesitated not because she didn't want to, but because she did. Then, after a long moment, she smiled. Okay. Michael let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Tonight, he asked. Tonight. She stood. He walked her to the door. Just before she left, she turned back. Thank you for the muffin, she said. Michael smiled. Small. Real. I'm learning. And for the first time since she started working there, she didn't feel invisible. Sometimes the smallest gesture, a name, a muffin, a second chance can begin to thaw the parts of us we thought were frozen forever. Chapter 4. The Note on Her Desk. Grace stood in front of her closet longer than she meant to. She wasn't looking for anything extravagant. No glitter, no statement dress, just something that said, I see you. I'm trying. Too. She chose a soft navy dress, fitted, simple, not loud, just her. She pinned her hair slightly behind one ear and added the faintest gloss to her lips. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back, not because she looked different, but because she felt it. For the first time in years, she wasn't dressing for protection. She wasn't hiding. She was hopeful. Michael was already waiting when she arrived at the cafe. He stood just outside, no suit this time, a charcoal sweater, dark jeans, and that unmistakable quiet intensity in his eyes. But it was softer now. like the storm inside him had begun to settle. "You look beautiful," he said. She blushed. "You look not terrifying." He laughed. The sound, low and genuine. They sat at a small table in the corner, the kind of spot meant for long talks and slow sips. He didn't rush to impress. No rehearsed lines, no boardroom performance, just him, present, and Grace let herself relax. Bit by bit, she talked about her favorite childhood books. He admitted he secretly watched terrible reality shows to shut his brain off. They shared dessert, one plate, two forks, and she caught herself watching the way he wiped powdered sugar from his fingers. There was something fragile in it all, unspoken, unrushed, real. Halfway through their coffee, he grew quiet. "I think I'm starting to believe again," he said. She tilted her head. "In what?" He looked at her. "In moments." Grace smiled softly, but before she could answer, her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced down. Unknown number. One message. "You don't know who you're getting close to. Be careful." D. Her smile faded. The cup in her hand suddenly felt too warm. Her skin prickled. Michael noticed. "Everything okay?" Grace hesitated, then turned the phone to face him. He read the message. His jaw tensed. "The only D I know," he said, "is Danica." His voice dipped, but she wouldn't. He didn't finish the sentence. The silence between them sharpened. No longer comfortable. It pressed against her ribs. "She knew your name," Grace said. "She saw us. She called me your assistant, like I was nothing more than background noise." Michael exhaled. "She's always known how to be cruel in a friendly tone." "Was she someone important to you?" Grace asked. He looked away. "We dated, briefly. She was smart, calculated, but everything was a game with her. The moment I stopped playing, she left." Grace nodded, trying to ignore the twist in her stomach. Michael leaned forward. "I didn't know she still had my number, let alone that she'd do this." "Why warn me?" Grace whispered. "Because she doesn't like to lose," he said. "And to her, people aren't people. They're pieces." Grace swallowed. "And what am I to you?" His eyes snapped to hers. "You're the first person who's made me feel something real in years." She didn't know how to respond. Part of her wanted to believe him. Part of her wanted to run. "I want to believe you," she said, "but I've trusted too fast before. I can't be that girl again." Michael nodded slowly. "Then let me earn it," he said. "No pressure, no fast track, just time." She gave a faint, tired smile. "Your lucky blueberry muffins are persuasive." He chuckled. "I'll keep that in mind." But even as their laughter faded, the weight of the message lingered like a bruise. The next morning, Grace arrived at work early again. The world outside was bright, but she felt heavy, off. She didn't know if it was the message, or the closeness from the night before, or the fear of what it meant to finally be seen. As she approached her desk, something caught her eye, a small white envelope. No name, just one word on the front. Truth. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up. Inside was a folded piece of paper, typed, no signature. "He's not telling you everything." Grace's breath caught. She looked around the office. No one seemed to notice. No one was watching. But her world had shifted again. This wasn't just a warning. It was a seed, and it had been planted. She walked straight into Michael's office. He looked up from his laptop. "Grace." She closed the door behind her. "This was on my desk." She handed him the note. He unfolded it, read it, and went still. "What the hell is this?" "You tell me." "I don't know," he said quickly. "I didn't send this, if that's what you're asking." "I didn't ask that," she replied. He blinked, then looked at her more carefully. "Okay, what do you want to know?" She held his gaze. "Is there something you're hiding from me?" He didn't answer right away, and in that pause, something shifted. "I didn't think it mattered anymore," he said finally. Grace's voice shook. "You promised me real." "I know." He sat down slowly, hands clasped together, like he was trying to hold himself steady. A few years ago, he began, Danica and I were part of a business pitch. She was PR, I was finance. She manipulated numbers, made things look cleaner than they were. I didn't know, not at first. Grace said nothing, just listened. When I found out, I confronted her, told the board she was fired, and she tried to drag me down with her. Said I knew all along, that I helped, I was investigated. I almost lost everything. But you didn't, Grace said. No, he replied, because the truth came out. But she's never forgiven me. Grace sat down slowly, the notes still in her hand. So, this is revenge? She whispered. Maybe, he admitted. Or maybe she just wants to make sure I never move on. She shook her head. Or maybe it's a warning I should listen to. Michael leaned forward. Do you believe me? She looked at her hands. I want to, and she did. But wanting to believe and being able to trust, those were two very different things. He didn't interrupt her silence, didn't try to fix it. He just watched her quietly, the way strong people break, without sound, without flinching, only in the eyes. I'll never lie to you, he said. She looked up, blinking back, something she didn't want to name. But you didn't tell me either, she whispered. He nodded. You're right. And just like that, the invisible thread between them, the one that had pulled tight in the elevator and held steady in the cafe. It didn't break, but it bent. The truth had arrived just like she asked for. But sometimes, truth doesn't heal. Sometimes it wounds first, to see what's still worth fighting for. Chapter 5. Regret is not innocence. That night, Grace sat on her apartment couch, the envelope still on the table beside her, and a mug of tea long gone cold in her hands. She hadn't touched it, hadn't touched anything. She just stared at the city, at her past, at everything that suddenly felt too loud again. She told herself she should walk away. It would be safer, cleaner, easier, but a small voice inside her whispered, and then what? Go back to silence. Her phone buzzed. Michael, dinner tomorrow. I want to tell you something about the past. Something I should have said sooner. She read the message 3 times. She didn't reply, not out of anger, but out of exhaustion. The weight of believing in people again was heavier than she remembered. She didn't go to work the next morning. Instead, she sat at her kitchen table with the envelope, the message, and a silence that felt like the same one from the elevator, but colder now, less curious, more defensive. At noon, a knock came at the door. She opened it slowly. Michael stood there, dressed down, unshaven, eyes tired. I was hoping you'd be home, he said softly. She stepped aside. He walked in, saw the envelope on her table, and froze. So, he said. She crossed her arms. Did you lie to me? He shook his head slowly. Not exactly, but I didn't tell you everything. Then tell me now. He rubbed the back of his neck, then sat down at her table, like a man surrendering. When the numbers first started looking bad, Danica floated the idea of massaging them. I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no either. I told myself, maybe we'd fix it later. I was scared. I'd just gotten promoted. I didn't want to lose everything. Grace stayed standing. I didn't sign the forged reports, he continued. But I didn't stop her either, not until it was too late. When I finally went to the board, she flipped, tried to drag me under with her. Her voice was barely audible. And you've been living with that guilt ever since. He nodded. Yes, and I deserve it. She looked at him for a long time. Then why tell me now? Michael's eyes met hers, raw, unfiltered. Because I'm tired of pretending. Because I finally met someone I don't want to lie to, even by omission. Her breath caught. He stood, slowly. I'll go. You don't have to say anything. But if you never trust me again, I get it. Just know that what I feel for you, it's the most honest thing I've ever known. He stepped toward the door. hesitated, then left, and she didn't stop him. Not yet. Grace didn't move for a long time after the door clicked shut. She could have run after him, could have asked the 1,000 questions burning in her chest, but she didn't. She stared at the envelope on the table like it might open itself and tell her what to do. This was what she'd asked for, truth. And yet it didn't feel like a gift. It felt like a fracture, a crack across glass. You can still see through it, but the damage is there, etched into everything. That night, her phone buzzed again. Michael, no more guessing. I'll be at the place we had coffee. 6 p.m. If you want the rest of the truth, not what Danica framed, I'll be there. It wasn't a plea, it was an offering. A door left open. Grace stared at the message for a long time. She didn't answer. But the next evening, at 6:01 p.m., she walked into the cafe. He was already there. He didn't look surprised. He didn't even smile. Just looked up at her like he'd been sitting with every word he never got to say. Grace sat across from him. I almost didn't come, she said softly. I wouldn't have blamed you, he replied. The silence that followed wasn't tense. It was waiting. She looked at him. Why didn't you shut it down the moment Danica showed up? Why let her say that to me? Why freeze? Michael exhaled. Because when I saw her, I saw everything I hated about who I used to be. The ambition without boundaries. The charm I used to weaponize. I froze. Not because of her, but because I didn't know how to face that version of myself again. Grace looked down. I didn't tell you everything, because I didn't think I deserved someone like you. He continued, you talk about grief like it made you softer. It made me harder. I forgot how to let people in. Her eyes met his. I saw the emails she gave me, the ones that suggest you were part of it. He nodded. I know what they look like, but they don't show the whole truth. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small, worn folder. This is what she didn't show you. Grace hesitated, then opened it. Inside, final reports from the investigation, signed board statements, legal memos. One line stood out. While Mr. Lockhart did fail to report irregularities in a timely manner, no evidence suggests active participation or authorization of falsified records. Corrective action was taken at personal and professional risk. She read it twice. You took the fall anyway, she whispered. He nodded. Because I couldn't live with pretending anymore. Grace closed the folder slowly, letting it settle. I'm not perfect, he said, but I'm not who I was. Then, even softer. And you're the first person who's made me want to prove that. Not just say it. She looked at him. No defenses, no polish, just a man trying to be better, trying to be seen. I was 24 when I lost him, she said suddenly. Michael tilted his head. Your fiancé, she nodded. He was steady, safe. Loving him felt like breathing. When he died, I forgot how to. Michael didn't speak, just listened. I promised myself I'd never give that much again, that I'd only open the door halfway. She looked at him. And then you walked in, cold, unreadable. I thought, he's safe. He'll never look at me like that. Her voice cracked. But then you did. She placed her hand on the table, not reaching, just resting. I don't want to fall in love with someone who disappears behind guilt or silence. I need real, even when it's ugly. Michael slowly placed his hand over hers, not gripping, not holding, just there. I want to be real with you, he said, even if I mess it up sometimes. They sat like that for a long time, hands still, hearts open. And then Grace whispered something neither of them expected. Let's take it slow. Michael smiled, not with relief, but with gratitude. I'd like that. Sometimes love doesn't ask for fireworks, just a quiet table. My hearts and sizes, oh, I say hand resting over yours, and the promise to stay. When staying feels harder than walking away. Chapter 6. The folder. The next week passed slowly. Like walking through fog. Grace went to work each day, sat at her desk, answered calls, sent calendar invites. But her mind was never fully there. Not since that night at the cafe. Not since she touched his hand and whispered, "Let's take it slow." Because even though the words had felt honest, even though his fingers had stayed resting over hers, the weight of the past hadn't lifted. And in the space between them, something still waited, something quiet, something unfinished. On Friday morning, Grace arrived to find a folder on her desk. Not a message this time, no handwritten word, just a sleek, black folder, unlabeled. It sat in the center of her desk, like it had been placed, not dropped. She looked around. No one seemed to be watching, no one out of place, but her hands still trembled as she reached for it. She opened it slowly. Inside, printed emails, screenshots, a timeline, internal memos, financial summaries, all of them bearing Michael's name, his email address, his initials, his signature. Nothing screamed guilt, but the implication was loud. Language carefully phrased, noted, and approved, reviewed internally. Let's keep this version until the final estimate is prepared. It wasn't proof, but it was enough. Enough to see doubt. Enough to crack the fragile, growing thing between them. At the bottom of the stack, a single sticky note, handwritten, in perfect cursive. Truth matters, doesn't it? Grace's chest tightened. Danica. Again, she stared at the folder in her lap, her breath shallow. This wasn't just bitterness. This was strategy. Danica wasn't warning her. She was playing a game. That evening, Michael texted, "Dinner tomorrow. There's something I want to say. Something I should have told you from the beginning." Grace didn't answer, not because she was angry, but because she didn't know how to believe anyone anymore. She had just begun to rebuild her sense of trust. And now, here it was again, the floor falling out from beneath her, not because of a lie, but because of something worse, a half-truth. The next morning, she didn't go to the office. She stayed home, curtains drawn, coffee untouched. She sat with the folder in her lap for hours, turning the pages like they might suddenly explain themselves. At noon, there was a knock at the door. Grace didn't move at first. Then finally, she rose and opened it. Michael stood there, no coat, no umbrella, just him exhausted, unshaven, quiet. "I hoped you'd be home," he said. Grace didn't speak, just stepped aside. He walked in and saw the folder on the table. His face fell. "So you've seen it," he said. She crossed her arms. "Tell me the truth," she said softly. He nodded. When the numbers started slipping, Danica wanted to repackage them. She said it was temporary, a placeholder to buy time. He paused. I didn't agree, but I didn't fight hard enough either. Grace stood still. "I didn't sign the fake documents," he added, "but I didn't blow the whistle fast enough either." She looked at him. "And when the board found out, I confessed," he said. "Everything I knew. I took responsibility, and she blamed you." He nodded, tried to drag me under, said I'd been involved from the start. I almost lost the company, but the board investigated. The report cleared me. Grace's voice was barely above a whisper. "So why didn't you tell me all this earlier?" Michael looked down. "Because I didn't want that to be the first version of me you knew." Grace swallowed, and then asked the question that had been sitting heavy in her chest. "Did you think I wouldn't still choose to see you if I knew?" He looked up sharply. "No," he said. "I was afraid you would, and that you'd get hurt for it." Her eyes glistened. Michael stepped closer. "I know I've failed before, but whatever's happening between us, this is the one thing I don't want to mess up." She didn't speak, just lowered herself slowly into the chair at the table. He followed. They sat across from each other, the folder between them like a wall made of paper and memory. "I don't want perfect," she whispered, "but I do need truth, especially when it's hard." He nodded. "I know, and from now on, you'll get all of it." A long silence passed. Then Grace said, "When Jason died, I didn't just lose him. I lost the part of myself that believed people could stay." Michael blinked. "I've worked so hard to feel again," she said, "to let anyone close. And you," she stopped, shook her head. "You matter more than I expected." He leaned forward. "I don't want to be a chapter you regret," he said. "I want to be something you build toward." Her heart ached, not from pain, but from hope trying to bloom in broken soil. "Finally," she said. "Then help me believe again." Michael reached across the table, this time not hesitant, this time with intention. His hand covered hers. "I will." The truth didn't fix everything, but it gave them something to hold. Not perfection, not certainty, just the fragile, beautiful start of something real. Chapter 7. Every part of me. Grace didn't sleep that night, not because of fear, not because of doubt, but because of the silence. That kind of stillness only arrives after truth is spoken, the kind that isn't clean or heroic, but tired, human, heavy. She laid in bed with her hands tucked under her pillow, staring at the ceiling. Michael had told her everything, not perfectly, not neatly, but honestly, and it haunted her. Not the past he'd confessed, but how much of it reminded her of herself. They were both running, just in different directions. Monday morning came gray and slow. She arrived at work earlier than usual, craving routine, the feel of keys under her fingers, the hum of emails she could answer, things she could fix. But something about the office felt different now. The silence between them no longer carried fear. It carried knowing. At 8, 11. Van Temper. There was a soft knock on the glass of her desk wall. She looked up. It wasn't Michael. It was Danica. Tall, polished, dressed in charcoal gray, with crimson lipstick that made her smile look like something sharpened. Grace stood instinctively. Danica smiled. "Relax. I'm not here to fight." "Then why are you here?" Grace asked. Danica placed a folder on her desk. "To give you something," she said. "Truth matters." "Right." Grace hesitated, then opened it. Inside were more documents, emails, meeting notes, archived memos from 5 years ago. Michael's name was on every page. "So what is this?" Grace asked, though her voice already knew. "Proof," Danica said, smooth and cool, that he knew, that he was involved, maybe not from the beginning, but certainly early enough. Grace flipped through the pages, her hands trembling. They're vague." Danica stepped closer. "He's charming when he wants to be, but don't confuse regret with innocence." Then she turned and walked away. No dramatic exit, just silence, like she dropped a match and walked off before the flames caught. That night, Michael sent a text. "Dinner tomorrow? There's something else I need to say. Something I should have said sooner." Grace didn't respond. She didn't cry, but she felt something worse than heartbreak, defeat. She had just started to believe again, to breathe without flinching, to let go of guilt she never deserved. And now she wasn't sure if Michael was just another beautifully crafted storm. The next morning, she stayed home, sat on the floor beside her bed, folder open on the rug, the same way she used to sit with textbooks in college, only now. The stakes were her heart. At noon, another knock. She didn't need to ask who it was. Michael. When she opened the door, he stood there looking like he hadn't slept either, unshaven, his coat wrinkled, his hands in his pockets, like he wasn't sure if he should be holding something or surrendering. "I was hoping you'd be home," he said. She didn't reply, just stepped back. He saw the folder instantly, and his face changed. "You've seen it," he said. Grace didn't nod, didn't blink. "Tell me the truth," she said. The whole truth. Michael moved slowly toward her kitchen table, sat down, rubbed his face like a man remembering a version of himself, he wished he'd left behind. When the numbers started going sideways, Danica came to me with the first adjusted reports. He said, I told her it was a bad idea, but I didn't stop her. Not really. Grace leaned against the counter, arms crossed, heart aching. I convinced myself it was temporary. He continued that we were just buying time until we fixed the real issue. But that time never came, and I stayed silent longer than I should have. And the signatures? She asked. They were real, he said, but none of them approved fraud. Just updates, versions, drafts. She manipulated the context. She swallowed. But you signed them. He nodded. I did. And that's on me. Grace stared at him. And the emails where you say, let's keep this version. What does that mean? Michael looked up, his blue eyes clear, exhausted. It means I was scared. It means I froze. It means I was trying to hold on to something that was already unraveling. She sat down across from him. The folder between them again. Same table. Same ache. You could have gone down with her, she said. I almost did. Why didn't you tell me? He didn't answer right away. Then quietly, because I was afraid if you saw every part of me, you'd walk away. Her voice cracked. And if I do now? He looked at her. I'll still be proud, I told you. She blinked, stunned by the simplicity of it. No begging, no bargaining, just truth. Grace looked at the folder again, then at him, then reached for something beneath the table. Her bag, she pulled out a note. Danica's, he's not the only one with secrets. She slid it toward him. She sent this after our last dinner, she said. And she's right. Michael stared at the note, then at her. There's something I haven't told you, she whispered. He sat still. My fiancé didn't just die in a car accident, she began. He was driving because of me. Michael's face tightened. I'd forgotten his birthday. I was overwhelmed with work. He was upset. I begged him to come home, said we'd fix it. Talk. She paused. So he got in the car, angry, distracted. Her voice cracked. He never made it home. Michael didn't move. I've lived with that guilt for years, she said. His family never said it was my fault, but I felt it in their eyes. In mine, she looked up. That's why I keep my head down. That's why I disappear into work. That's why I never thought anyone would love someone like me again. Michael stood slowly, walked around the table, and knelt beside her chair. You never had to tell me that, he said. I know, she replied, but if we're going to do this, really do this, I don't want to hide anymore. He took her hand gently. I'm proud of you. She smiled through the tears. Then we're even, she whispered, because I'm proud of you too. They stayed like that for a long time, not fixing anything, not erasing the past, but letting it breathe, letting it live beside them without ruining what might come next. We are all made of things we wish we could undo, but love, real love, asks only this: bring everything and stay anyway. Chapter 8. The Things We Carry. Weeks passed, not in fireworks, not in sweeping declarations, but in soft things. Coffee cups placed quietly on desks without being asked. Two people standing a little closer than they used to, shared glances across crowded hallways that meant something, because now they both knew they meant something. Michael didn't change overnight. He still worked too late, still forgot to eat, still walked into meetings with the weight of the world in his shoulders. But now he'd pause just for a second and ask, how are you? And not the kind of how are you that people say when they don't want an answer. He waited. He listened. Grace wasn't used to being listened to. Not like that. On a Thursday evening, she invited him over. Not for anything grand. Just dinner. Just quiet. She cooked pasta, burned the garlic, laughed when he offered to help, and made it worse. He washed the dishes. She dried. They didn't talk about the past, or the elevator, or Danica. They talked about music, books, favorite places to walk. when they couldn't think. They talked like two people who had already survived the worst day of their lives and were now building something from the soft, ordinary pieces left behind. After dinner, he stood by her window, looking out at the city lights, like he was seeing it for the first time. "I never thought I'd want this again," he said. She walked to his side, hands in her pockets. "Me neither." He turned to her. "You've changed me, Grace." She shook her head. "No, I think you were already changing. I just saw it." He reached out gently, brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. Their lips met. Not rushed, not hungry, but quiet, like two people who had known what it meant to lose everything, and now knew the cost of trying again. The next morning, Grace arrived at work early. Again, her heart was lighter, but there was a new kind of ache inside her. The ache that comes when hope starts to grow in soil you'd sworn was barren. She reached her desk, paused. There was an envelope waiting. This time, no handwritten cursive, just typed words on stark white paper. No greeting, just a message. He's not the only one with secrets. And this time, a name at the bottom, Danica. Grace stared at it for a long time, because she knew Danica wasn't just trying to destroy Michael anymore. She was coming for them, and Grace wasn't afraid of the note itself. She was afraid of what it meant, because for the first time, Grace realized something she hadn't fully admitted. This wasn't just Michael's story. This was hers too. She had things she hadn't told him, not about guilt or loss, but about what came after. The part where she stopped believing in herself, the part where she stopped dreaming, where she had accepted being invisible, because that felt safer than being abandoned again. Danica was wrong. Grace did have secrets, not scandal, not drama, but something quieter, shame. The kind you tuck away beneath polite smiles and early arrivals. The kind that slowly convinces you that you are not enough, not for love, not for risk, not for more. Grace looked down at the note, then folded it, slipped it into her bag, and walked toward Michael's office. The door was open. He looked up when she stepped in, smiling relaxed in a way she was still getting used to. But his smile faded the second he saw her face. "What is it?" he asked. She shut the door behind her. "There's something I haven't told you," she said quietly. Michael stood slowly. "Grace, you don't have to." "I do." He nodded gently. Sat. She didn't sit. "Not yet. My fiancé. He died because of me," she began, repeating the words she'd said before. "But that's not the whole truth." Michael listened. She took a breath. "After he died, I didn't just grieve him. I started erasing myself." She finally sat, her voice trembling. "I stopped painting. I stopped calling my friends. I took this job, not because it was what I wanted, but because it was invisible, safe. I stopped living, not because I was afraid of death, but because I didn't believe I deserved anything more than survival." Michael's eyes softened. "I thought grief would just make me sad," she whispered. "But it made me small." And then, quieter still, "I don't want to feel small anymore." He reached across the desk, not with force, not with urgency, just presence. "I've made you feel seen," he said, "but you've made me feel human." They stayed like that, palms pressed together on a desk once meant for power, now just a bridge between two people choosing not to hide. That evening, as they walked out of the office together, the building felt different. No longer a place they merely worked. It had become a witness to pain, to silence, to beginnings. Outside, the wind carried a faint chill, but the city lights shimmered. They didn't speak, didn't need to, because this quiet wasn't heavy. This one was healing. Some secrets are not sins. They are simply the parts of ourselves we've forgotten how to forgive. Chapter 9. The Weight of a Name. 6 weeks later, the office had changed. People smiled more, laughed louder. The air no longer carried the cold, sterile hush it once did. When Michael Lockack entered the hallway, even the interns had noticed. "Did Mr. Lockack just ask me how my weekend was?" One whispered to Grace near the coffee machine. Grace smiled to herself, not because it meant everything was perfect now, but because it meant change was real. Not fast, not flawless, but real. She and Michael hadn't labeled anything. There was no title, no announcement. Just moments. Dinner on Wednesday nights. Walks to her car after work. His voice on the phone at 10 p.m., low and warm, saying things like, "I miss your quiet." Grace didn't need labels. She just needed him to keep showing up. And he did, in small ways. That meant more than grand gestures ever could. One afternoon, they found themselves waiting for the elevator together again, just like that first day. Only this time, the air between them wasn't filled with silence. It was filled with knowing. "Do you ever think about that day?" he asked as the numbers descended. "The elevator," she said. He nodded. "All the time," she admitted. He looked at her. "It feels like everything changed in that pause between floors." "You changed," she whispered. He turned to her, eyes soft. "No, you did." And I followed. The elevator dinged. The doors opened. But this time, neither of them stepped out. He reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. They stayed there a second longer, not trapped, not running, just together. That weekend, it rained again. Same kind of rain as that day. Heavy, relentless. But this time, it didn't feel like the world was falling apart. It felt like it was being rinsed clean. Michael cooked dinner at his place, burned the rice. Grace teased him until he laughed so hard he spilled wine on his shirt. She cleaned it with a dish towel, and he watched her with eyes that had once been afraid to feel. "I could get used to this," he whispered. She smiled. "You already are." He leaned in and kissed her slow, certain, and for a while, there was nothing else in the world but the sound of the rain and two people who had stopped hiding. But on Monday morning, everything shifted again. Grace arrived at her desk and immediately saw it. Not a note, not a folder, but a USB drive wrapped in a crimson ribbon. No name, just a typed label. "If you want the real truth, look inside." Her stomach tightened. She looked around. Nothing. No one. Just the same office. The same morning. But she felt the shift. She didn't open it. Not right away. Instead, she walked into Michael's office, holding the drive in her hand. He looked up. His eyes flicked to the object she carried, and he froze. "Where did you get that?" "On my desk," she said softly. "No name." "But I know." His jaw clenched. Danica. Grace sat, placed the USB between them, like a weapon neither of them wanted to touch. "Do you know what's on it?" Michael exhaled. "No, but if it's from her, it's twisted. Should I open it?" He didn't answer at first. Then finally, not alone. That night, they sat in her apartment, laptop open, the USB drive inserted. Inside, one folder passed. Inside that, 6 video files. They opened the first one. It was a surveillance recording from a conference room years ago. Michael and Danica seated at the table, talking. There was no audio, just their faces. Danica laughing, Michael nodding, signing something. The next video, another angle, another day, her hand resting on his arm, his mouth moving. The third emails, images of them, public outings, private meetings, none of it criminal, but all of it intimate, too intimate. Grace didn't speak, not because she believed Danica's version, but because doubt doesn't need proof. It just needs timing, and this timing hurt. Michael stood suddenly. "I told you everything," he said, voice cracking. "Everything." Grace looked up at him. "Then why does it still feel like you're defending something you haven't admitted yet?" He ran his hand through his hair. "Because I don't know how to fight a ghost. I don't know how to prove I didn't do what she's implying." Grace whispered. "Then tell me one thing." He stopped pacing. She stood too, her voice steadier now. When you were with her, did you love her? Michael went still. No, he said. I wanted to because I thought it would make me stronger, more polished. She fit the life I thought I wanted. He stepped closer. But with you, I'm not stronger. I'm softer, more open. And for the first time, I don't want to win. I just want to stay. Grace felt something loosen in her chest, not because it made the pain disappear, but because it reminded her what had always mattered more than proof: presence. I don't care about her anymore, he said, but I care about what she's trying to take from us. Grace reached for his hand. Then don't let her, he squeezed back, voice trembling. I won't. Later that night, as she walked him to the door, she hesitated. I never thought I'd say this, she whispered, but I'm glad the elevator broke that day. Michael smiled gently. Sometimes the universe has to trap us to make sure we finally stop running. She leaned her forehead against his, and for the first time, the weight between them didn't feel like something to carry. It felt like something they were choosing together. The past will always knock. The question is, will you answer it or close the door and finally choose your future? Chapter 10, A Key for When You're Ready. 6 months later, it was Sunday morning. The air was crisp with autumn. Leaves floated down from the trees like golden promises whispered by the wind. Grace sat on a park bench beside Michael, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee he had brought her without asking. No sugar, extra cream, exactly right. They didn't speak at first. They didn't need to, because there are some silences you earn, not by avoiding pain, but by walking through it together. Michael stared out at the lake, his fingers fidgeting slightly with the seam of his coat pocket. Grace noticed, but said nothing until he finally turned to her. I've been thinking about something, he said, voice steady but unsure. She raised an eyebrow. Dangerous. He chuckled. Very. Then he reached into his coat, pulled out a small velvet box. Her breath caught. But when he opened it, it wasn't a ring. It was a tiny silver key. She stared at it, blinking. It's not a proposal, he said quickly. Not yet. It's just a key. He held it in his palm, not pushing it toward her. A key to my place, for whenever you're ready. No pressure, no deadline, just a door that's always open. Grace didn't speak right away. Her eyes filled quietly, softly. The way tears come not from heartbreak, but from the overwhelming relief of finally being seen. Why now? She whispered. Michael looked down, then back at her. Because I don't wake up scared anymore. Not scared of feeling, not scared of failing, and not scared of you seeing every version of me, even the ones I don't love yet. He swallowed. And because for the first time, I want to build something I don't have to hide inside of. Grace took the key gently, closed her hand around it. It was small, but it felt like a cathedral, a life, a beginning. That night, as she stood at her mirror, brushing her hair, she paused, looked at her reflection. Same face, same eyes, but not the same woman. This version of her didn't apologize for her past, didn't shrink from love, didn't silence herself just to be safe. This version of her held a key and knew she was worthy of walking through any door. She didn't move in that night, not the next either, but the key stayed on her nightstand, then in her purse, then on her own key ring. And every time her fingers brushed against it, she remembered she was loved, not for her perfection, not in spite of her grief, but because someone had finally seen every broken, beautiful part of her and stayed. One morning, as they stood by the elevator again, just like that first day, Michael glanced over and smiled softly. Funny, he said, this is where it all started. Grace looked at the panel, watched the numbers light up one by one. It didn't start here, she whispered. It started the moment I stopped pretending I was okay. He reached for her hand. She let him take it. The elevator doors opened. They stepped inside. But this time, They weren't stuck this time. They weren't trapped. They just stood quiet, steady, side by side. Two people who had been through hell and hadn't come out perfect, but came out whole. Sometimes the love we wait for isn't the kind that rushes in. It's the kind that waits until we're finally ready to receive it. Not as a rescue, not as a fix, but as a choice. So if you've ever loved and lost, if you've ever grieved in silence, if you've ever wondered whether you'd feel again, this story is your reminder. You are not too broken. You are not too late. And one day, someone will hand you a key, not just to their home, but to their heart. And you'll finally know you were always worth opening that door. If this story found you when you needed it, the next one goes even deeper. I'll be waiting for you there. Until then, don't stop believing in slow love, quiet love, true love, love that stays. She didn't fall in love all at once. She didn't wake up one day healed, but somewhere between the elevator and the truth, between her grief and his guilt, they found each other, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. Grace no longer looked in the mirror and saw a shadow of who she used to be. Now she saw someone who chose to feel even when it was hard, someone who stayed soft even after the world gave her reasons to go cold. Michael didn't become a different man. He became fully himself, a man who had failed, a man who had lost, but a man who finally knew what it meant to stay when it mattered most. They didn't promise forever. They didn't need to. They promised honesty, kindness, a key left on the nightstand, and a door that never closed. Because sometimes love doesn't walk in with fireworks. It slips into your life quietly. It waits. It listens. And when you're ready, it stays. Maybe you've been Grace. Maybe you've been Michael. Or maybe you've been both. Grieving, guilty, guarded, wondering if anyone will ever look past your silence and still choose you. This story is for you, for the one who's still carrying a name they never got to say goodbye to, for the one who blames themselves for what they couldn't control, for the one who still checks their phone and hopes it's a sign that someone sees them. This is your reminder. You are not too late. You are not too broken. You are not too much. And love, true love, doesn't need you to be perfect. Just honest. Just willing. If this story moved something in you, the next one will take you even deeper. Another love story, another second chance, another open door. Stay with me, because the stories we tell can sometimes become the healing we didn't know we needed. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, don't stop believing in quiet love. Love that stays. Tell us, what are your thoughts on this story? Leave a comment and rate it from 0 to 10. Make sure to subscribe and tap the notification bell to follow all our latest stories. And don't miss out. Click here to watch more now.